Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
Into Purple Access, it's Judd, it's Ross Brendel, it is Chip Scoggins week, Star Tribune sports columnist, my buddy, former co-beat writer with me on the Vikings beat. Of course, Purple Access, sponsored as all Purple Daily shows are by our friends at Quick Trip. And Chipper, we were both out there yesterday. You've been to 3 or 4. What have been your primary impressions so far from turn the page to a new quarterback era with Kevin O'Connell, Sam Darnold, and J.J. McCarthy?
I've been really impressed with J.J. McCarthy, and that's not to say I haven't been impressed with Sam Darnold, because I think the last, 4 or 5 practices, he's been good.
Yes.
Darnold.
Very
But
solid.
I think McCarthy has looked more ready for the moment than I maybe anticipated. I thought there'd be a lot more hiccups, and there probably are hiccups behind, that we're not really seeing as much, but he doesn't look overmatched by it, right?
Mm-hmm.
His arm is stronger than I thought it was, and his confidence to be able to throw a ball into a tight window or take a chance with on a shot is there. And so I've been impressed with him. I think Darnold is really starting to connect with Jefferson, particularly. I think you're seeing that in the red zone. I still have some questions about their secondary and how that's going to come about. But a couple guys that caught my eye. Theo Jackson, for one, to me has stood out. He's had a really good camp. I think he's a guy that's vying for playing time. Mm-hmm. You got a lot of safeties right now that they're trying to. Mm-hmm. I was joked with Seifert yesterday. I was like, put 5 safeties out there, I think he stood out, and so but it's. I want to see Saturday how much J.J. McCarthy plays, and what he's able to do if he can translate what we've seen in practice to the game. And in talking to him, Judd, he just has a presence about him.
Right.
I mean, he has an absolute presence about him, which you want to see from your quarterback. And I think that that comes from a guy who's played in a massive college program and played in big games. He's played at the Big House, Ohio State. He's played in the college football playoff. He's been a winner his whole life. And when you talk to him and you hear him in his press conferences, that confidence comes across, I think.
You can tell he loves this. Like, that's my thing, is he is wired like you want a starting quarterback to be. It's interesting, he had a really bad practice on Friday. He talked about that at his press conference yesterday, because he had a great practice on Saturday and said, and I don't think this was lip service. He said, I came back, I learned so much from failing on Friday. I thought yesterday he was okay at best, but he's also not playing with the first team.
Sure.
I personally think if you take a step back here, Chipper, 2 things stand out. One is the progress that he has simply showed from the offseason springtime work to now, I think is substantial. There were some throws in the spring where you're like, ugh, and you don't see a lot of throws now. He's getting picked off at times, but he literally looks like he has improved throwing to his left. The other thing, though, that I really applaud is I think the way this whole thing is being orchestrated by O'Connell is brilliant. Darnold's the guy. McCarthy is not. They could get McCarthy. I think he's had about a handful of reps with the ones, and they could get him more time. But what happens both internally and externally the first time McCarthy hits Jefferson? Oh, my God, he's ready.
That's it.
And I think O'Connell, don't mistake him seeming like a friendly guy for being that nice. I think O'Connell's main fear is not the media, not the fans. It's what happens in that building. And this is going to be his plan and his plan alone.
I think it's all that, Judd. And let's talk about that, because I think O'Connell, in the best case scenario for him, Sam Darnold comes out, plays lights out, then nobody's talking about it, or very few, right?
Correct.
But he has been so intentional and deliberate and calculated about how he wants this narrative to go. And coaches love to control everything, and he clearly wants to control this narrative about the development. Is Sam Darnold's the one. They're not going to rush J.J. McCarthy. He's not going to be put out there until they feel comfortable that he's in the right spot.
Yep.
And so far that because of the way they've manufactured it, and Darnold's I think done well in camp, it really hasn't become a thing. But when game starts, and if Darnold struggles, and you start to hear chants in the stands, we want JJ,
right.
What happens then? What's going to be O'Connell's patience level when he's getting asked about it a lot? That's what I want to see.
With us or internally?
Well, I don't know that players.
Oh no, I'm saying people in the front office.
Oh, you talk well.
I'm talking football operations.
Yeah,
because I think that's who he fears the most.
Yeah, you need to be in alignment, man. I know that's a buzzword, but you got to be on the same page there. That could be problematic, and I would think, because everything to this point they deferred to Kevin O'Connell on this, quarterback decisions, all those things. Kwesi has said this is his
correct.
This is his expertise. We're going to defer to him on this. I would think they would do that. But there's two scenarios here. One, Sam Darnold plays great, and we don't talk about it. Two, he doesn't play great, and we all talk about it every single day, and it becomes the thing.
Well, and the intriguing thing about that, Chipper, is so it dovetails into what Mark Wilf said this week. I thought that he might give O'Connell and Kwesi or O'Connell an extension now, not because it's like, wow, he deserves it right this second, but because there's clearly a patience factor here. And if at that pre-training camp press conference, it's why I asked those guys, I said, you're going into the second to last year of your contracts. If this goes off the rails, how do you guard against playing McCarthy? And O'Connell and Kwesi both gave interesting answers. O'Connell's, to me, is the most important. And his was basically like, I got my plan, and it ain't changing. And so all of that being said, I don't think, unless J.J. McCarthy somehow magically checks every box O'Connell has, and we don't know what those boxes are, I don't think he's going to play until then. No. And I don't think O'Connell, I think O'Connell would rather feel that he was right and go down with the ship than feel he was pushed and still possibly go down with the ship.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I wasn't there for Mark Wilf's scrum, but we talked about this a number of times on this show, Judd, that like this to me feels like a reboot, like almost like year one for this regime. Yep. And that's not to say you just ignore what happened the previous 2 years, but in some ways you do. You're starting back at square one in terms of what they've done to get to this point. Like, clear the salary cap, draft a quarterback, get rid of Cousins, all those things that you're setting up for, a 3 or 4 year plan. And Kwesi said you do these things, a couple years out. So when Mark Wilf said, no, we're not even going to address their contract situation, it's like, well, I thought I think you've been probably more stronger thinking that they would get an extension, both of them, or at least O'Connell for sure.
Yeah.
At this point. And he wouldn't, I think he was asked, they need to make a playoffs or whatever. And he just, Mark Wilf wouldn't go there. So I found that interesting. And I don't know that necessarily adds any more pressure or any more temptation to Kevin O'Connell to say, holy cow, my contract situation is not going to get addressed. I have to be forced into doing something else. I don't think that. I think he sticks to his guns on this and sticks to what he believes in terms of what's going to be best for McCarthy's development. But it's like when a regime drafts a quarterback top 10 overall, that's not a 1 or 2 year thing. That's a 5 year, at least a 5 year plan, right?
Well, yeah, and I think that in fairness, I think the expectation would be that if McCarthy's going to begin to make an impact, a significant one, it'll be next year. But so I did go back and look this up, and to your point, I don't think the Wilf's not extending O'Connell and Kwesi means a lot, because if you go back to Zimmer and Spielman were going into the last year of their contracts in July of 2020, the pandemic year. Zimmer was given a 3-year extension right before training camp. Spielman signed one in August. So they were both fired with a couple of years left on their contract, and that is actually why I think Zim is working now, because he was paid through last year. They also have the cautionary tale of a guy that we covered by the name of Brad Childress, who in 2009, when everyone was going crazy with Vikings mania, in November of 2009, they signed him to an extension through 2013 and then proceeded to fire him the next year. So I don't know that the O'Connell-Kwesi thing now, upon doing more research, is like or it's just sort of a business strategy.
Well, and I don't think, what we've seen from Ziggy and Mark is not knee-jerk ownership. If anything, they show extraordinary loyalty and patience with their leadership. So I don't think this is going to be I don't think they're going to look at this year and say, you know what, boom or bust, because you don't want to turn over a regime after 3 years. I mean, you got to stop doing that.
Oh God, yeah.
And not that they haven't done it, because they showed Spielman and Zim patience. But I do think, even if they are not willing to do this for a business decision, I have to think in their mind, because Mark said we trust in the way, the direction and what they've done, and he told me that privately when I talked to him at OTAs and minicamp. I talked to Mark Will for a column. They know that this is the start of something. They know that this is a reboot and it's going to take a long play. So I don't think this is a win or else season for this regime. I really don't.
And I think O'Connell too. O'Connell, it's interesting because I've been impressed by almost everything he's done, especially away from the games themselves, because like training camp, I think he's run this really smart. Kwesi's a little bit more of an unknown, and it's not necessarily his fault. We just don't see how...
We don't see him, yeah.
We don't see how the meal is prepared necessarily, but by him, O'Connell's life is on a platter because he's a coach. But I agree. I don't think that this is some type of, if they don't make the playoffs, they're in trouble. I don't think that's the case. And in fact, I think if you expect this team to make the playoffs, you're probably on drugs. It would be a pleasant surprise if they did, but I don't know that that's the goal.
Yeah.
So as this whole thing starts to come together, I think it's going to be very interesting to watch unfold. But unless things go off the rails, unless things go drastically wrong, I don't think anyone's job is in jeopardy.
No, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't. You've taken 2 years to get into a position where you feel like, okay, now you have a plan of you've turned over the roster, you've gotten younger, you've gotten a lot of salary cap space cleared. You drafted a quarterback that you think is going to be your franchise quarterback. You signed Justin Jefferson to a historic deal. You signed Christian Darrisaw. You've done these things. Why would you do it about face and pivot to something else now? I mean, that would make any sense. So I don't think that's even part of the discussion. And so to me, this is, I'm really curious based on what we've seen from McCarthy. Again, if Darnold plays great, you don't have to make a decision. But if it's uneven or if he doesn't play great, that's when I want to see how O'Connell handles that, because it'll be a big, I don't know if test of a head coach's thing, but it's an important.
That's fair.
Important decision for an organization when you're going to pivot to him.
Absolutely.
A quick aside, gentlemen, before I get to my real point, it's just something that you just said, Chip. I kind of giggled when you talked about the pivot, like what would happen? How would the Vikings ever pivot? How bad? What would have to go wrong this season for the Vikings at the end of the year to say, oh boy, we're changing? I think you'd have to go 0-17.
Yeah,
and there'd have to be other stuff mixed in there, right? What is the scenario in which you would pivot after this year? It would have to be disastrous and of an epic proportion failure.
No, I mean, you're not going to do that, but you're going to have to, if they are believed to be under 4-year contracts, you're going to have to, I don't think you want them going into that last year.
No,
100%.
So you're going to have to extend them after this season. So,
yeah.
But I mean, that's
that's next year's problem.
That's next year's problem, right?
My real thought kind of goes back to J.J. McCarthy, because I think we've all been impressed. The on-the-field stuff will figure itself out in time. I think what everybody continues to be impressed going back to his college days and even now through rookie mini camp, OTAs, and training camp is just how professional and how put together he is. Obviously, a lot of that is on him, but it had to be super helpful to play college football for an NFL head coach. So the fact that Kevin O'Connell is getting a quarterback who's coming in with, to a degree, some NFL experience, at least, of how to lead a program and lead a franchise. Again, the on-the-field stuff will take care of itself, but you would have to think he has been put in just a great position because, A, of the type of person that he is, but where he played college football and who he played for.
For sure. When he had his press conference on Wednesday, McCarthy was asked a question. He said, well, I'm going to quote Coach Harbaugh here. And he used a quote about, I forgot what it was. I mean, clearly you played for a guy in college who played in the NFL at that position and runs it like a pro organization. So that has to, that had to benefit him. And I walked away from his press conferences when we talked to him is like, I believe quarterbacks have to have a presence, and it's hard to hard to define it, hard to describe it. But you walk away from any time you deal with, our conversations with him, and you're like, that guy has a presence and a maturity about him. Just the way he explains things, that won't guarantee that he'll be a successful NFL quarterback. But I think you have to have that, right, Judd?
Oh, absolutely. And what's funny is O'Connell has that, but he didn't have the talent. If you combine the two, it's lethal. But the thing that I love about McCarthy outside of his college background as well is he loves this, and he wins, and he has a credibility built in. Like the fact that at the end of the off-season OTAs, right? They said, "Are you going on vacation?" He's like, "I've done enough of that. I'm staying here and working."
Yeah.
That is a thing that might seem small, but I think in the eyes, especially at that position, in the eyes of the coaches and in our eyes, it should be absolutely huge. So yeah, I felt like Kirk Cousins was always trying to work on his presence.
Yeah.
But it was never, I don't know it was ever real. JJ McCarthy, it's built in, and you're born with it.
Yeah.
It's not something you invent.
And it was, I love the exchange we had with him Wednesday when Seifert asked him, like, has there been a sequence in camp that like you're particularly proud of? And McCarthy said, I had a really bad day. And he thought it was the third day in pads.
It was Friday.
He said, I just had a really, he said I had a really bad day. But I came back the next day and, had put it behind me. And I asked him, I followed up, I was like, what'd you do when you walked off the field that night? That night, like, how did you kind of hit reset or whatever? He's like, well, I started this thing in Michigan where if I had a really bad day, I'd wear my tights the whole night. And then that night, he says, it's kind of a metaphorical thing for me. He said, I look myself in the mirror. I think about the things that went wrong that day and what I've done previously that had went right. And then I let it go and I shed it. And I never think about that day again. And, it didn't come across as goofy or anything. It just came across as a guy who has a real mature understanding of what he needs to do to be successful and kind of things he does to kind of prepare himself. I'm just impressed with his maturity.
He's very zen, but it seems sincere, if that makes sense. It
that's
doesn't
it.
seem like it's made up.
I don't think I don't think you could be the quarterback at Michigan and all that's asked there and the spotlight that you're under and the big games that they play on and just be not that and not be mature. I mean, I think you're just biting. It's probably his personality too, but I just think it's a good start for this young guy and on the field. Again, I knew when I watched him play the Gophers last year, he was faster than I thought. Judd, the way he moved, he hurt the Gophers with his feet a lot that night.
Yep.
And so I'd known that part of him, his ability to kind of be elusive. but I didn't really have a good grasp of how strong his arm is and how
Yes.
confident he is in his arm until watching him in this camp.
He's got a really good arm, and that was obvious in the spring. I didn't think the throws were great. I think the throws have improved. You've covered a lot of football, and you've actually covered some teams that have had really good defenses, Chipper. Where does Brian Flores stand as far as the amount of confusion he causes? Like we're seeing things now that we didn't see a year ago. The originality of this guy to me is off the charts.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen a coordinator like him in terms of the flexibility that he uses with his personality, with his personnel. Most coordinators like, this is my scheme, this is what we're doing, and there might be some adjustments, but he's almost kind of like this mad scientist that's like, well, I got, this guy that has this kind of body type, and I'm going to put him here. I'm going to use him there. I'm going to do these different things. We've seen it with the way he moves guys around. I think Dallas Turner is going to be a guy that we see get moved around. Obviously, Josh Metellus last year playing 12 different spots.
Yep.
But I think Dallas Turner is going to be in that boat. Van Ginkel is going to be in that boat. I'm curious to see, and maybe this just is a training camp flash, Judd, and maybe it's just my Tennessee side coming out. But Theo Jackson has really shown up in this camp, and I wonder if he's going to be that next guy in line that's going to be used all over.
Did we talk about this as practice started yesterday? I forget, but one is I think Theo Jackson is going to be used, and by the way, he's at a fantastic camp. He deserves to play. I think he's going to be used. I think Harrison Smith is going to get series off this season, which he didn't. But you joke about could they play 5 safeties? I could see a world with their current cornerback situation where they play 4. I could see Theo Jackson. And here's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if we could see Shaq Griffin and Byron Murphy Jr. at times being the boundary corners. Now, because I think Caleb is the odd man out, not to make the roster, but as far as playing time. But instead of having Murphy scooch inside in the nickel, could we see, because Metellus is positionless, so he's not really a safety at all. I don't even know he's a defensive back. And he was fantastic as well on Wednesday. Yeah. But could we see Bynum, Harrison Smith, Metellus in his role, which I think is going to be more towards the line of scrimmage, and then some type of deal where Theo Jackson or Bynum is in the slot?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Bynum probably, right? Because he's played corner.
Or Theo Jackson. I mean, I think, it's funny. I asked Flores about this the other week, just about, trying things. He's like, this is when you do it. Camp and preseason games, this is where you try stuff, and if it doesn't work, you just throw it out. But it's like, this is the trial and error part. So I don't think anything's out of bounds with this guy. He's like, if it has rules to it, and structure, then we'll do it. But so if a guy is performing and making plays, I think Flores will find a spot for him on the field and some kind of package. It doesn't mean you're going to play 40 snaps or whatever, but it might be certain alignments or packages they have, and particularly with where they're at corner and just the concerns that they have there. So I think that's why I think this offseason was big for Brian Flores, because Van Ginkel, Grenard, drafting Dallas Turner. I think he said, these are the guys that I want. This is what will fit with my defense. These are guys I can be creative and move around.
Yep.
And so I think, obviously the defense fell apart at the end of last year. I think their injuries and personnel depth issues bit them. Teams figure it out.
Get film on you too.
Yeah,
that's
they figure out how to exploit it. Yeah,
absolutely.
But I think he's got some guys, some more chess pieces that he will be able to use.
Do you feel like we're going to see? So Pat Jones, the second, who I actually thought might get cut, which I no longer think. He is built like he's not the player, but he's built like Daniil was. It looks to me like Flores wants his outside linebackers, i.e. his edge guys, to be more sleek like Turner is. Like Van Ginkel's not a huge man.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to see Pat Jones deployed more inside as well? I wonder if they're going to, and off of that, Chipper, I wonder now in retrospect if, because I always said, why doesn't Daniil play inside sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And because go back to that 2019 Saints playoff game. And I wonder if he, and if he did, I don't blame him. I wonder if he balked at that because he was such a special edge guy.
Yeah.
I think we might see more trickery up front.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I saw Jones in a first team drill. They had him outside. I didn't notice. Did he go inside some
He
yesterday?
does play outside some, yes.
Yeah, I saw him
no
more
question.
outside yesterday. I think he could. I mean, I don't think I mentioned that the conversation I had with Flores at the press conference. He said a wise person once told him, if you're going to do one thing in this league, you better do it at a very, very high elite level. And that means if you're rushing the passer and that's what you do, you're only on the outside. Otherwise, be able to do 3 or 4 different things. And so
right.
I think for him, I think he encourages players to buy into that, hey, this is an opportunity for more playing time if you're able to go inside and you can get in, these different kind of packages. So I don't know that he ever pigeonholes any player into, okay, this is now some players, Harrison Phillips, how many places
he's not going to play edge,
but if guys that have a length, some speed, some size, I think he's willing to try them in different spots.
Awesome stuff, Chipper. We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks, and I'll probably see you at the game on Saturday.
I will see you there. See you, brother.
Preseason football. See ya.